So this week we welcome an absolutely wonderful lady. It's Diana Cooper, who is the world expert on anything high dimensional frequency and ascension. She's written how many books now, Diana?
The 34th comes out very soon.
34 books. So that's an amazing achievement. So welcome, Diana. Thank you for spending the time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Now I've looked at lots of videos and met you in person with regards to your current work, but I wanted to understand a bit more about the personal side of you. Maybe pre your first book, which was that the Angel one?
No, that was my
Ah,
fifth, actually.
oh, fifth, right. So what
Yes.
was your first book? Was that the Atlantis stuff?
No, that came
Oh,
much later. Light Up Your Life was the first one, and then Transform Your Life. And
hmm,
actually, they're still out in many languages
yeah,
and being renewed because they're the basics of how you live your life
yeah,
and how you can transform it. So a precursor really to the spiritual laws book,
brilliant.
Discover Atlantis. They happen to be here. Discover Atlantis, which is actually one of my favorite. I love it. Angel Answers, where all sorts of people pose questions and the angels answer them. So you get
Yeah.
a totally different perspective, which is amazing. Angel Inspiration, which was one of those extraordinary books when I was in a real time squeeze. I was going to Australia for 6 months. I wanted to get a book. I was Silent Stones. I was absolutely devoted to this book. I was writing it day and night. And I thought I can just get it done before I go. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night with angels all around the bed. I felt as if I was levitating. And they said, "We want you to write another book about angels. You're to call it Angel Inspiration, and we want it immediately."
Right. Okay.
In the morning, I put my precious Silent Stones aside, which was a spiritual novel, and I wrote that book, and I got them both done before I got to Australia. And
Brilliant.
then a little light on the spiritual laws,
Okay.
which is, yes.
Isn't that amazing that you've got literal guidance telling you what to do and what not to do? Isn't that amazing? Because you know what to do when to do it, and you've written so many books.
Well, I wouldn't quite put it like that.
Mm,
I mean, I can still make mistakes, go my own headlong way,
yeah,
but I am very aware that there is guidance and I can ask. And of course, they like you to ask.
yeah,
People say, "Well, can you ask these little things?" And the answer is yes.
mm,
You've been given a guide, especially so that you can have that guidance. You've got a guardian angel so that they're there all the time. And it's up to us to just watch the signs
yeah, yeah,
and be
definitely.
aware of them. Everybody has the same. The more you work with angels, the more you work with guides, the more are allocated to you. I was once, many years ago, staying in a bed and breakfast, and there were several other people staying there, but I didn't know that the lady running it was a medium. And I went off the first day to do the course I was doing. And when I got back, she said, "You, the one in the blue, you left a whole lot of angels here unemployed yesterday."
Brilliant.
Well, I went off, and that was really how I learned that there were lots of angels. Since then, I've heard it many
Yeah,
times. But we are surrounded by angels, especially once we start talking about them and to them. And then our task is to direct them because they can't do things unless without because that interferes with our free will,
mm,
unless we ask them to. And so, yeah, I learned then that it was really important not to have unemployed angels hanging around.
yeah.
Ask them to help war zones, help people, help others make higher decisions, whatever.
I've read a book quite recently called Big Magic. It's quite a modern book, but that's about kind of you get given. I can't remember the term she uses, like inspiration to do something, and if you don't do it, then they'll go off and find someone else. That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's a really important point. As soon
yeah.
as you're impressed to do
Believe.
something, you feel excitement and enthusiasm. That's the way they give you the message.
Yeah,
People think, "Oh, I need someone to tell you." You should be so lucky. It doesn't work that way.
yeah.
You just get the idea, you get the enthusiasm. And of course, it has to be grounded.
Mm,
And some people have wild ideas they're picking up out of the ethers, but they've got to have the energy
yeah,
to ground it. They've got to work at it.
yeah, yeah.
And because that's
Definitely.
what being on Earth's about.
Yeah, I forget the book actually. Tim mentioned a book in a recent interview that it's his Bible, that his favorite thing he's ever read, really. And that is just you put all your passion, effort, and your soul into a project that if it is given to you, and it will
Mm.
just manifest itself in the physical form, basically.
Yeah,
Speaking of which,
absolutely.
I've got three of your books here. That's one.
Oh, the magic of unicorns.
I
Yes.
didn't understand that at all, but I've got two other books which I completely understood. They're really
Very
simple to
basic.
follow.
Children's books.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. And also I
Yeah.
found this in the charity shop the other day, unicorn cards.
Unicorn
Yeah,
cards.
so I've got
Yes.
some of the stuff, but I picked one out earlier and it came up with prosperity, which is quite nice.
Right. That's
And I was
rather
literally
nice.
writing about that a minute ago because I'll go into it in a minute. But
That's
so
actually on the
with
wonder
regards
of
to
beauty.
your personal life, did you have any like during a child, because your family I think were not very sort of religious or spiritual. Did you have anything that sort of cropped up in your life before you started writing your first book?
No, my mother always used to say, "Oh, that imagination of yours." But no, nothing, because anything spiritual or psychic was absolutely frowned on.
Mm,
The only
yeah,
things that you had to do were literally what you could see,
yeah.
feel, touch. And then that was the only thing that was important. And so, yes, I think it was a big shock to my family. They could never accept that I was anything other than insane.
Yeah,
Weird.
I mean, watching your Rich and Judy interview and subsequent interviews on live daytime TV, which is full of all sorts of characters, usually quite bored people sat at home. It must have, as Tim put it in his words, must have taken balls to do that. And I think it needs spokespersons like yourself because you've got always had amazing dignity, great presentation, and you speak with authority. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, and it kind of reminds me of Princess Diana or something. I'm sure you've heard that before, or someone like
Oh,
that. Similar.
no.
But
No.
I was saying to the woman I was working with last night, who's helping me out at a wedding, saying it's different. To someone like kind of hippy dippy, kind of oh, it's all like this, and whereas you sit there in total authority and you can hold Richard especially um, his attention and make him question potentially, or other people question things if they're completely closed. But you had 14,000 calls and you were invited
100.
back the next day. Yeah, that's amazing. When people say,
Yeah.
I wrote it down. Not no, never dared was the words you used. Never dared speak about it. And so many people have had
Well,
real
I think that was
stuff.
the amazing thing that when they had the 114,000 calls, and well, actually, they probably had more, but
Mm,
the whole system broke down. It was a bit of a shock to them
yeah,
all. And a lot of the people were saying, I've had an angel experience, but I've never dared talk
yeah.
about it before. And of course, that gave people permission. It kind of broke things open and allowed people to start communicating about angels. So that was really, really important. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and those who were ready heard it. But that was 30 years ago.
Mm,
And a lot's happened. The whole frequency of the planet's risen since then. It's not like the same place anymore. People are starting to meet and communicate with their soul groups and soul energies. And so those that are ready are able to meet people and talk about all of these things, the angels, the dragons, the unicorns that are, and the fairies and elementals that are all part of the angelic realms, and becoming more and more visible to us.
that's great because it's with the high dimensional stuff. A lot of people can see it as wishy washy because they close to believing it, so they're not going to experience it to some extent. Maybe they will. Some people awake overnight, don't they? Like Eckhart Tolle or whatever. But I mean, I've personally seen an angel a few weeks ago. I'm pretty sure, or I'm not. I'd ask you about that actually because it could be my wife's higher self. Um, so I'll ask a question actually. I woke up. I felt the presence of something in the night, and I just woke up with this beautiful woman over. It's like Ghostbuster type stuff over my wife. Not physical, but pretty look physical, and the sides were kind of like that. And she had a headband on, brown hair, and it was absolute love. And she was just like that with my wife, just giving her pure love. And I got the impression, I think it was like, oh, he can see me. And it's one of the only things I've had apart from a dragon experience. And it just like vaporized off. And then I woke up probably an hour or two later and there was an orb there.
What I'm being told is that that was her the angel and her higher self together,
Mm.
and that they came in together for you to be able to experience that and see it, as well as for her to receive that love. And what a lovely story, because it just demonstrates how much we receive while we're asleep and we don't even realize it. And our guardian angel, who loves us absolutely unconditionally and is there for us all the time, however good or bad we are, is trying to give us love. Amazing, no judgment. I remember a teacher telling me once how this little boy in her class was really miserable. And she said to him one day, "You know, your guardian angel loves you." And he said, "What, even though I can't do my maths?" And she said, "Yes, absolutely loves you as you." And the little boy went, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." And it is. We are so loved.
Going back to your family, you've got 3 children and
I've got 3
five
children and
grandchildren.
5 grandchildren.
Have they followed in your footsteps, or I know one of your grandchildren might do potentially? I think I've seen an interview.
Well, they all do what I would call spiritual things.
Yeah,
One of my daughter is a nutritionist, and she helps people with right eating and all of that. She's written a book called Body Works, and it's a fantastic book, all about how, really basically, how you can eat to keep your body in perfect balance. And my other daughter, she as a counselor at a hospice, so
brilliant.
she's dealing with people who are really distressed. I don't know how she does that, but she
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
And I think she does it because spiritually she recognizes that this is their karma, this is their soul pathway, that's what they've chosen. And so she can step herself outside it, and therefore she can help them from a clear space, which is really good. And my son does long-term project planning. He has his own company, and he was for many, many years in humanitarian aid, and is now talking of going back to it.
Brilliant.
You know,
That's great, isn't it? So a lot of people
amazing.
say, I'm not spiritual, I don't believe in religion, but actually a lot of people's jobs are very spiritual and required, to help other people ascend, aren't they? I
I
think.
think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. People think that in order to be spiritual, you have to be on an angel or a master's or an ascension, that type of path. But actually, the path of loving kindness is a hugely spiritual ascension path. And you don't have to know anything about these things. It's the way you live your life that counts, not what you know. Actually walking your talk. All of those are the energies that are needed, spreading joy and light. That's an amazing spiritual path.
Yeah, some of the most spiritual people I know, as I mean, I've heard from everyone so far. Holding your light is probably the most important thing, and being within your, holding yourself, especially if you're in an adverse situation, and managing to sort of spread words of wisdom to people and help people. And I've got relatives that constantly get drawn into doing charity work and helping homeless people, giving them a bit of money or help buying them some food and stuff like that, and giving people advice. When my wife is, everyone gets drawn to my wife, she's a bit of an angel herself, I think, and and a lot of people call her that, like,
Really?
what wonderful Anya or angel and stuff, and she's constantly got people at the door crying their eyes out, and within an hour they're bright as rain, so it's really special, really nice.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's a hugely spiritual path.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to get there. It's difficult being masculine, I think, at times, because you've got a lot of other stuff going on in your brain,
I think it
your
is
body.
hard. Yeah, I think that a lot of men find it more difficult to be on this particular psychic spiritual path.
Yeah,
But it's very much needed, because leaders
yeah,
are needed in all these areas.
yeah,
And by being a leader, I don't even necessarily say you're standing up saying this and that. It's the energy that you give out. People receive more from your energy than they do from your words.
yeah.
And so if you can hold that energy, you can affect millions of people. We know that if you're in a crowd and there's 100 people and 2 people are fighting, the thing that you remember and you pick up is the energy of the 2 people fighting. But the reverse is also true. If there's one person holding an energy of peace, that is affecting everybody around. It's just that it's not so obvious. And so people don't pick it up so readily. But it's affected them, it's changed their brain waves, it's given them hope or whatever. So every single one, it makes a difference, it's important.
You've done some amazing things in your life with your professional work, but you've told me yourself you went backpacking. That was in your 60s to India. That must have sorry, Australia, where you met Aborigines. What happened then? That sounds cool.
Well, I've also been backpacking around India in my 60s. Yes, for my 60th birthday, I left my house for 6 months and went backpacking on my own around Australia. And I had the time of my life. I wanted to meet Aborigines. I just put that energy out there. So I immediately met somebody whose ex-husband was at school with Aborigines in Cooktown. So I set off and I met lots of people on the way who gave me lifts, or I took trains and all sorts of things, coaches, whatever. And I reached Cooktown and I met a couple of Aborigine elders. I spent several days sitting in the kitchen of this one man who was incredible. He was so wise. And, he told me the story of how his entire family basically had been massacred by the British. And I mean, the story was not for now. It was a really hideous story. And all the babies in the entire tribe died. Most of the children. And he said, but we have to forgive. We have to let go. And he sits on various councils all about forgiveness and humanity and understanding. And he talked about their customs, the way they do things, because the Aborigines are amazing. But of course, we're all masculine orientated, so we're all short term and pushing forward, and they're all accepting and long term and carrying the divine feminine. But it was fascinating. But then I was in the garage of another Aboriginal elder who was rather the opposite. The garage was fly blown and filthy, and it was all about the money they could get out of the government. So they're like us. They're not all the same. So that's the juxtaposition made it very interesting. And when I came back, I wrote a part of my spiritual trilogy of novels, The Codes of Power, all about the adventures I'd had out there, because it was just an incredible time.
Australia's great, and a lot of Southern America, because the people had the ability to hide, so they're still here, so we can see them now. I think if they were stuck on an island somewhere, let's say Tenerife, that's a good one, the Guanchans, they'd all just be murdered, wouldn't they? That's sad.
I think we did a great deal of murdering. They were hunted and shot. But they carry the Lemurian energy for Earth, so that they still bring that down. They were the people that grounded that Lemurian energy, because the Lemurians were etheric. They were fourth dimensional etheric energy, really. And then at the end of Lemuria, the Aborigines came in and grounded it. So there was a time when Atlantis and Lemuria and that Aboriginal Lemurian energy were here on Earth at the same time. But yes, they've carried that for many years.
It's ancient, and it's a bit more of a modern example.
Love of nature, their love of the earth, their understanding about sharing and caring. An Aborigine child is traditionally taught that it's praised if it gives its toy to another child. Or as we say, hey, that's yours, grab it back. But they are the exact opposite of how we live.
Another amazing thing you've done, you travelled in Spain, the Camino, which is how many miles?
Oh, I walked the Camino. It's 500 miles. Yes.
Oh, that's
you start in France, you walk through. That was absolutely fascinating too. And I did it as a pilgrimage. I went with somebody else, and we just chanted silently as we walked all day, and it was amazing. But there was funny things, like one night we got to this hostel and there were 108 beds. Well, as you know, 108 is a very spiritual number. I said, wow, this is going to be a really amazing night. And it was all, I got into my bunk and there was a man who was 20 stone above me. At least, and every time he moved, the bed did this, and I was ready to jump out every time he turned over. So that was not the best night's sleep. But we went down to hear. You could just go off, take a bus down to hear the monks singing the Gregorian chants.
Wow, brilliant.
But, you know, as the bus came into the village, there was a tangible force field around the village. And it was such a reminder of how in the olden days, people went to the village church on a Sunday and they sang. That held the energy of the village.
Yeah.
There, it was so powerful that you could literally feel it as you went into that village. Oh, and there was somewhere else that stayed where they washed the pilgrims' feet when they came in. And then they opened a little chapel to let us go in there for a service. It was just day by day, fascinating experience. The whole thing was just extremely interesting.
Yeah. But just French and Spanish people are also really nice, especially on that route. So you get a lot of, and all the people that you walk with or past and stuff, everyone's you're all in it together, aren't you?
Well, it's quite interesting because the first 400 miles, you don't meet many people. The last 100 kilometers, I think it is, then everybody's walking that bit and it's crowded. And that wasn't nearly so much fun.
Okay, yeah.
The first 400 miles were brilliant.
So no other bunk bed experiences then? No other bunk bed experiences that
no. Oh, some of the places they had triple beds.
Oh no.
That was more scary, yeah.
On your 75th, you jumped out of a plane. Hopefully you had a parachute. Because you wouldn't
I did have a parachute. That's why I'm here now. Yes. Two of my children came. My other daughter said, "Not on your life." It had nothing to do with it. But yeah, and that was a very interesting experience. Not quite what I expected, but interesting.
What's it like when you get out? Because one of my only fears, actually, I'm not scared of much, is jumping out of just heights in general.
I remember climbing one of the Mayan pyramids, and at the top, it was just like a narrow shelf and then a sheer drop. And you know, that was the first time I realized I had a fear of heights at all. I was glad to get off that. And then I got off that and I went to the loo. There was some toilets in the jungle and there was a snake in my toilet. I thought, what am I learning from this?
I was just say, what does that mean? Snakes are really powerful, aren't they?
But it's a warning, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Snakes are warnings very often. I mean, they also tell you metamorphosis. They've got a lot of messages, but this one was caught in the door jamb and it kept flying over, nearly hitting me in the face. And I'm like this with my little rucksack, holding it up in front of me.
Or was it trying to attack you?
It was trying to get out of the door.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so as it swung back, of course, the head would come into my face. So I said in the most dignified squeak I could manage, "Can you get some help, please?" And then I heard these boots coming down the hill, and everybody was saying, "Don't hurt the snake."
Going back to your current personal life, you moved in lockdown and you became like a professional artist with your fence.
No,
that is really good. I'm going to put the pictures up so you can see them. So
you're not. Oh, I'd have chosen better if I'd known that.
I'll put them up with your permission. Which ones did you do first, and which ones were you most proud of, and why did you do them, and what did they mean?
No, the thing was, I'd never painted anything in my life. I got nothing to do. I only knew one person in Muddyford. And you weren't allowed to go out anyway. And I've got this fence wrapped right round my house. So I painted it blue. And then I thought that looks a bit plain. And so I thought, well, I'll just paint something on it. I'll see if I can paint my dogs. So I put the dogs on it. And to my amazement, they look like my dogs. And then I just carried on. I've got parrots and jungle scenes. I've got swans and dragons. And then I've got a Thailand scene of beautiful sea, which I look at in the winter. And last weekend, I did a river scene. And so I really like that best now. lockdown is a perfect time. I've
Yeah,
got nothing else to do.
yeah,
So
definitely.
it was really brilliant. And as I said, I did them last weekend, and that's my favorite. The latest one is always your favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
My latest book is always my favorite book.